With all the fancy lasers and apps and digital devices out there, using and understanding traditional measuring tools has become a lost art. But if you ever want to build a shed, a garage, a patio cover, a deck, a doghouse, a hen house, a birdhouse, or an outhouse, this humble yet remarkable tool is your best friend. And even if you don't, just knowing what this can do is really just part of any well-rounded woodworker's knowledge base. So today, I'm going to explain what all the mysterious scales and marks and notches on this tool are for. And I'm even going to show you how to apply that knowledge for yourself. Let's do this. These are all rafter squares, more commonly called speed squares, except only one of these is actually a true speed square. Can you guess which one? Hey everybody, hola amigos, Lee here from Busted Knuckle Woodworks. And I won't keep you in suspense any longer, it's this one from Swanson Tool Company. Now everyone calls these speed squares, and that's fine, but the original was invented in 1925 by Albert Swanson. And even though the Swanson Tool Company holds a trademark on the name Speed Square, this 100-year-old design has been copied countless times by nearly every tool company on Earth. And with good reason, because this is quite possibly the most versatile measuring device for builders ever invented. This is a handheld, totally analog, no battery trigonometry computer. And despite that, do you know what most people use it for? This and this. And that's it. But the mighty Speed Square is capable of so much more. Nowadays, speed squares come in various sizes, the most common being 7 inches and 12 inches.
That's what she said.
And they do come in metric as well, although those are hard to find here in the US, so I printed this one with my brand new Bambu Lab H2D, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And the beauty of printing your own is you can give it any brand name you want. Some speed squares have fancy features like bubble levels, extendable fences, and locking pins. But whether you own a cheap plastic one, a fancy stainless steel one, or something in between, they all have the same basic features in common. So let's start at the bottom. All speed squares have a flat base called a heel. The main purpose of the heel is to register the edge of the square against the edge of a board. It's important to remember most of the functions of a speed square rely on rotating it around this 90-degree corner point called the pivot. Let's say you want to mark a line at 45 degrees across this board. Obviously, that would be quite easy. But what about angles other than 45 degrees? The long side here has degree marks that go from 0 to 90. So let's say you want to lay out a 60-degree angle from the edge of this board. You can use these to line up your mark. But it's important to remember that these degree markings actually indicate the complementary angle from what you're going for. That is to say, the angle as measured from a line perpendicular to the edge. So if you want to line 60 degrees from this edge, you set the square so that the edge of the board lines up with a 30-degree mark. Not the 60, the 30. And there you go. This works for any angle. If you want an angle 75 degrees off the edge, set it at 15. Whatever angle you want from this edge, take that number, subtract it from 90, and that tells you what degree mark to set your square on. And if you want to make this process quick and repeatable, you can use what are called stair gauges. They're usually brass or brass plated, and you can attach them to the edge of your square to register the same angle repeatedly. What I like to do is to use a ruler to get the placement really accurate, lock it down, and voila, there you go. So now let's move up to the next set of numbers, which is the common scale. And this scale is used to lay out common rafters. Come with me. My original plan for this video was to show this using a series of diagrams, but that would be lame. And so just for you, I built this mock-up of an actual roof. Now, this is not going to be a complete video on how to build a roof, but I am going to show you how to lay out all the angles required to build these rafters. So first things first, what's a rafter? A rafter is a board used to hold up the roof of a building, and there are several kinds depending on how and where they're used. A common rafter is one that runs at right angles from the ridge board to the top plate. And for a full-size structure, that's typically going to be a 2x6. And as you can see, to construct a common rafter, there are 4 cuts you need to make. First, there's a plumb cut at the top, where it attaches to the ridge. We call this a plumb cut because it's plumb or perpendicular to the ground. There's an eave cut on the other end that's parallel to the plumb cut, and 2 cuts here in the middle, a heel cut and a seat cut where the rafter attaches to the top plate. And the angles at which you make these cuts will vary depending on how steep or shallow the roof is. Of course, you could use a bunch of complicated trigonometry to figure out all these angles, but with a speed square in your tool belt, you don't have to. However, in order to understand how that works, you need to know that construction guys don't even mess with angles. They work with slopes, or as they call it, the pitch. The pitch of a roof is defined by 2 dimensions. Run, which is the horizontal distance, usually 1/2 the overall width of the building, and rise, which is the vertical distance from the top of the building to the apex of the roof. And we express the pitch as the number of inches of rise for every 12 inches of run. So of course, the more inches the roof rises per foot of run, the greater the pitch, and the steeper the roof. Let's take a look at this particular roof. This roof is 4 feet wide. That means the run is half of that, 2 feet or 24 inches. And the vertical rise is 10 inches. And of course, all of this would be, laid out in the building plans. So if the roof rises 10 inches over a 24-inch run, that means it will rise 5 inches over a 12-inch run. That's actually easy to demonstrate using this framing square. You see, here's your 12-inch run and your 5-inch rise. That means the pitch of this roof is 5, and that is the magic number. No angles, no calculator, no complicated math, just one number. And once you have that number, the world is your oyster. So, to lay out the plumb cut for a common rafter, we set the pivot point at the top and pivot the square until the top of the board lines up with the 5 on the common scale. And draw a line. That's where you need to cut. Just remember, for the plumb cut on a common rafter, you line up the top of the rafter with the pitch number on the common scale. Next, we need to make 2 cuts here in the middle for this rafter to sit on our top plate. A vertical heel cut and a horizontal seat cut. That's called a bird's mouth. The heel cut here is exactly parallel to the plumb cut, and we already know how to do that. But where exactly do we place this mark? There are tables that come with some speed squares or that you can find online that will give you this figure based on the rise and run of your particular structure. You'll see in this table the length of a common rafter for a 24-inch run on a 5-pitch roof is 26 inches. And if you don't have a table, you can also find this information on most framing squares. This is a bit hard to read, but you'll see here this says common rafter length per foot of run. And remember, the pitch on our roof is 5. So if we follow this line over to the 5-inch mark, we discover that length is 13 inches. And that's per foot. So for a 24-inch run, you would double that figure, giving you a common rafter length of 26 inches. Now what if your run is some odd figure like 37 and 5/16? You're not going to find a table that will help you with that. But there is a way that works for any roof dimensions by using some of that math you swore to your teacher you would never, ever, ever use again in your life. Oh, you were so wrong. The run and rise of a roof form a right triangle. That is, a triangle where one of the angles is a 90-degree angle. And for any right triangle, the relationship between the lengths of its sides can be expressed by the formula a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's called the Pythagorean Theorem. So in this case, we know that the run is 24 and that the rise is 10. 24 squared is 576. 10 squared is 100. Add those up and you get 676. And the square root of 676 is 26. So, 3 methods, same result. 26 inches is how far down the rafter we would want to make our heel mark if the rafters were meeting exactly in the middle, which, of course, they don't. Remember, there's an 1.5 inch thick ridge board here at the top, so we'll need to subtract half the thickness of that ridge, which is 3/4 of an inch, giving us a figure of 25¼ inches. So let's measure down 25¼ inches. That's where we'll make our heel cut line. Once again, we'll line up our speed square on the 5 mark of the common scale and draw a mark for our heel cut. Our next layout line is for the seat cut, which is of course at a right angle to the heel cut. You've probably noticed that most speed squares have a diamond here at the 3.5 inch mark. That's because the width of a standard 2x4 top plate is 3.5 inches. So ideally you want the horizontal portion of the bird's mouth to match, which is very easy to do by placing the pivot at the bottom of the rafter while simultaneously lining up the diamond with the plumb mark like so. And there's your mark for the seat cut, and you've laid out your bird's mouth. Now, most roofers lay out the seat cut to match the width of the top plate, but you don't have to. Some like to go a little deeper or a little shallower. And to do that, you can line up your plumb cut line with this line right here, move it up or down, and place it where you want. The important thing is you don't want to cut more than halfway into the rafter, and you definitely do want to make these all the same. Now the final mark is for your eave cuts, and the placement is just based on how far of an overhang you want and how wide your fascia is going to be. That's this part right here. I'm marking this out for a 12-inch eave with a 4-inch fascia. I cut this all up with a circular saw off camera because you don't want to watch me wielding a circular saw. Trust me, it's not pretty. But we've got it all done, so let's see if it fits. Voila! But are we done? Oh no, we're not done, because we've got this other scale here called the HIP-VAL scale, and we're going to talk about that. But first, come with me. I want to show you something. All right, listen, I'm not going to lie. I used to be a 3D printing skeptic. I used to think it was just a toy that people used to make other toys. And besides, I'm a woodworker. What use would I have for a 3D printer? Boy, was I wrong. All of my 3D printing friends told me that once I got one, I wouldn't want to live without it. And you know what? They were right. A few weeks ago, I picked up the Bambu Lab H2D, which is, without a doubt, the world's most capable desktop 3D printer. And I am constantly thinking of new uses for this thing. On the first day, I printed shelf brackets for these husky steel cabinets, which haven't been available since 2021. And I printed these tool holders. And this paint mixer. And these painter's points. Hold on, these just might be Eiffel Towers. But come on, this is all child's play for the H2D. It's not even breaking a sweat. So then I printed this multi-marking square. Now we're getting somewhere. The H2D features dual nozzle printing, which opens up a whole new world of possibilities, one of which is to print multicolor in one go, like with these markings, with no pausing, no switching out filaments, and minimal purge waste. See how nice and sharp these are? Then I had a crazy idea, a ruler made from TPU, just to see if it was possible. Because dual nozzles allow you to print not just colors, but multiple materials in one go. TPU is a flexible material that's notoriously tricky to print. But with the H2D's dual nozzle capabilities, I was easily able to print this ruler with flexible TPU for the body and rigid PETG for the markings in a single print. Something that's not even possible with a single nozzle system. And dual nozzles aren't the only thing that sets the H2D apart, because the H2D is way more than a 3D printer. It's an all-in-one DIY powerhouse that also features laser engraving, laser cutting, vinyl cutting, and pen plotting. I'll be showing a lot more of what this can do in future videos, so stay tuned and check the links in the description for all the information you need on Bambu Lab printers, filaments, and more. Back to the video. We've talked about common rafters, which use the common scale on the speed square. So now, let's take a look at corner rafters. Here's the end of the roof, and from the ridge board to the top plate here in the middle, we have what's called the king rafter. And there's nothing special about this, it's just a common rafter. Same size, same length, same angles as all the other common rafters. And here we have an outside corner, and a rafter that connects a ridge board to an outside corner is called a hip rafter. And a rafter that connects a ridge board to an inside corner is called a valley rafter. And to lay these out, you use the HIP-VAL scale. HIP-VAL stands for hip and valley, in case you didn't already guess that. And they use the same scale because really, they're both the same rafter. Outside corners are called hips, inside corners are called valleys, but they're basically just mirror images of each other. Same length, and they use the same angles. So let's lay out the plumb cut for our hip rafter. Remember, this is a 5-pitch roof. So we're going to pivot the speed square on top of the rafter, just like before, but this time we're going to use the 5 on the HIP-VAL scale. If we use the 5 on the common scale, the plumb mark would be here, which isn't what we want. Using the 5 on the HIP-VAL scale, we get this line, which as you can see is at a shallower angle. Why is it a shallower angle? Well, that's because corner rafters are longer and they lay flatter than common rafters. For a 5-pitch roof, common rafters rise 5 inches for every foot of run, but corner rafters rise 5 inches for every 17 inches of run. So the angle to the ridge board needs to be shallower. Then we lay out the heel cut just like we did before, using the same formula to figure out this length. Remember, we're using the 5 on the HIP-VAL scale here. We'll lay out the seat cut the same way we did before as well, except this time we'll go 5.5 inches. And as you can see, there's also a diamond here at 5.5. Isn't that convenient? And same for the eave overhang. And there you go. You'll see that I did cut this end to a point so that we can snug it up into the corner. Yeah, that is a nice fit. I'm going to show you one more cool trick you can do with a speed square and a chalk line. So let's say your roof is damaged by, I don't know, a giant chunk of blue toilet ice from an airplane. And you need to replace a couple of rafters, but you don't know what the pitch of this roof is. So here's how to figure out the pitch of an existing roof. Because those giant blue chunks of toilet ice are falling, and you've got to be ready for that. Hold the square like this, then take the end of the chalk line and hook it onto the fence, then run the line up to the pivot point, and then drape it over so that it swings freely like this. Set the long side of the square against one of the rafters that presumably wasn't damaged by the icy toilet apocalypse, and note where the line intersects the common scale. So you see right here, it's on the 5. So you know the pitch of this roof is 5. I'm ready for you, airplanes. Did you think this was all a speed square is good for? Hell no, not even close. You'll see there are ruler marks here, so you can use it to set the height of a table saw blade or a router bit. You can check your tools for square, like your jointer fence or your drill press. You can use it to set up miter cuts. You can scribe with it, a makeshift level, a clamping square, a pipe cutting stand, as a slicing guide for a delicious brie. Who doesn't love a delicious brie? Can you think of any uses for a speed square I haven't thought of? Leave it in the comments, and the 3 best ones, as chosen by me, will win 6 months of paid membership to my Patreon, where your name will appear at the end of every video, just like these amazing folks. Remember though, trolling mediocre woodworkers on YouTube, that one's been taken.